The Purple Aura. I really didn't think too much about finding a Pokémon Blue version in my room while packing for college. I honestly couldn't remember where I had gotten it from. I just knew that it was mine. At this point, I know, this is sounding a lot like a typical creepypasta, right? Weird Pokemon game, don't know where you found it, etc, etc. Well, no, that's just what happened. Maybe I should tell you who I am first. I am your not-so-typical 18-year-old girl. I just finished high school this past June and started on my journey to become a veterinarian in July. I am a huge Pokemon fan ever since I got my first Pokemon game in the 3rd grade. It was Pokemon Yellow version, and I can still remember the exact moment I borrowed it from an older friend at school. The excitement of a brand new game to play on my Game Boy Color was overwhelming. I never thought it would open the door for me to become one of the biggest Pokemon fans I'd ever known. But back to my story. I had just found this Pokemon Blue version in my room, and for the life of me I could not remember where I'd gotten it. There were so many times that I walked around and gone to different yard sales in my hometown that I literally could have gotten it anywhere. I had never owned a copy of Pokemon Blue before now. I had always wanted a copy after my yellow battery died. I didn't know at the time you could change the battery, and I lost it shortly after, one of the many times I moved in my life. But I had never gotten a copy. Mainly because by the time my yellow had died, my mother had brought me Fire Red to keep me occupied. I know I did own Platinum, Pearl, Soul Silver, Fire Red, and White, but not Blue. Now I know you guys are expecting me to say that there was a creepy picture on the cartridge or something like that, but there truly wasn't. I knew plenty about what a bootlegged copy looked like, and this version of Blue most certainly wasn't. Just a normal blue cartridge with a sticker a little worn down. It had the official Nintendo seal and the little backwards L shape at the top of the cartridge on the back. I, however, don't know if someone ever hacked it or anything of the sort. I just knew that finally I had my own version of Pokemon Blue. I am not gonna lie, I got really nostalgic when I popped the blue cartridge into my purple Game Boy Color and watched the Game Boy logo roll past. Just the sound alone made me happy. Now when the Game Freak logo rolled by, I literally started bouncing on my bed. I was so excited. Soon enough, the screen popped up to the continue screen. There was no previous saves, so I could only assume that the internal save had died. Knowing I couldn't save put a slight damper on my spirits, but not much. I was way too happy to even care, really. Professor Oak came up and explained everything as usual, and I picked my name and my starter. I've always named my sprite Ichigo, and my favorite starter was almost always the fire type, so of course I picked a Charmander and immediately dubbed it Flame. Nothing happened that was weird or out of the ordinary at first. I whizzed my way past the first 3 gyms, the Self-Scope, Side Quest, and Pokemon Tower, but it was soon after that I started to question things. I was just exiting Lavender Town and into Route 8 when a small exclamation point appeared above my sprite's head, and my sprite turned around. Nothing really happened, except a small text box that read the line of, "It feels like someone is watching you." Okay, odd, but whatever. I dismissed it as a glitch, or maybe it was even a hacked game. Who knew? I didn't care too much, as long as I got to play my game. Unfortunately, I was only able to take a couple more steps before I was stopped again. I sighed, exasperated, and button mashed my way through the next couple lines of text. "It feels like something is watching you. Was that someone moving over there?" I frowned unhappily. I just wanted to play the damn game, so why wasn't it letting me? At this point I could no longer move my sprite, for it had started walking by itself to the tree that needed to be cut by the tall grass and stopped. "Would you like to use cut?" I just mashed yes and watched my sprite enter the grass. It didn't occur to me that it was weird that I didn't have to go to my menu and select cut, even though I knew it wasn't even introduced into the games until Gen 2. It wasn't long before I entered into a battle with a wild Pokemon. It seemed like a normal fight until the Pokemon popped up. It was a wild Growlithe, but it looked off. Nothing gruesome or anything such as that, just the sprite seemed to have a purplish tint to it. Or maybe you could call it a bit of an aura. I didn't think you could even get a Growlithe in blue at all. I shook it off as the game being old and threw in my level 37 Pikachu, Pika. Yes, I know, I'm super original with my name, but that's what I call my Pikachu from Yellow version, and I used it ever since. The battle commenced as it normally would, my Pikachu going first because it had a higher speed. There was no unusual moveset for either Pokemon, just a normal Pokemon battle. I'm not sure why though, but at the last minute I caught the Growlithe and named it Leon. Being that it was male, it was sent to my PC and I never really thought of Growlithe much after that. I went through the game as I normally would and beat the Elite Four in no time. After having completed it, I shut off the game and put it away to be packed. A couple days later, I moved to college to start my next adventure in life. I had 3 other roommates in the apartment we shared. That might be a stretch considering it was only a kitchen and 3 bedrooms, and we all mostly got along well. They never understood my fascination with Pokemon, Zelda, and other random things like that, so I never really shared my story before this. Around this time is when I started to read creepypastas. Pokemon ones to be exact. I read them constantly in between studying, playing my newer Pokemon games, and trying to get along with my roommates and the other girls on our floor. A couple months went by and my one roommate moved out, and I got bored. She was probably one of the only girls I talked to on the floor, and the girl I shared my room with just didn't speak much. It was at this time that I started going through my box where I kept all of my games, and found my Pokemon Blue version. I'd left my Game Boy Color at home, so I swiped my Game Boy SP out of its hiding place and popped in the cartridge. At first, it wouldn't work. I blew in it, popped it in, and repeated. This wasn't unusual since my SP was getting old and the game itself was pretty ancient as well. On 5th try, the game booted up like it normally would. I button mashed my way through the opening, and I wish I hadn't because then, maybe, I would have known that things were not all good and well in my game. I wasn't surprised that there wasn't a continue, so I started a new game and did the usual. As I got to Oak's lab, however, things started to confuse me. First off, Oak wouldn't talk to me. He just sat there and said, "Ellipsis." Okay, whatever. So I tried Gary's house, whom I ultimately always named Blue anyway. I talked to his sister, and this is what she said. "Oh, are you looking for Blue? I'm sorry, he's not here anymore." And then she wouldn't talk to me again. I sat there for 5 minutes trying to talk to her, and all I got was ellipsis. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do anymore. Had this happened to me before? What did I do? I honestly couldn't remember what had happened the last time I played. My brain had been so fried from finals I couldn't think straight. I wandered around aimlessly until I decided to go into the tall grass. Instead of getting stopped by Oak, I was thrown into a wild Pokemon battle. Cliché, I know. I waited to see what would happen and held my breath. I read enough creepypasta that I expected something bloody, or maybe something bad. What did happen just shocked me. I was thrown into a wild battle with a wild Growlithe, level 18, male, with a distinct purple aura. I just stopped. What? I wasn't sure what to do, so I threw a Pokeball since the other options of fight and run were not available. 1 shake, 2 shakes, 3, ping. Leon has been recaptured. At this point, I guess I was a little freaked out. Did I somehow continue my old game? But then, why on earth did Leon just get recaptured? I decided to check these stats. Nothing unusual about them. Normal moveset, except the sprite was gray. It looked like a shadow of a Growlithe with a purple aura. I immediately walked to the first town and I tried to deposit the Pokemon in the PC. Oddly enough, it worked. I know you're not supposed to be able to deposit the last, or in my case, the only Pokemon in your party, but it did. And then I did the stupidest thing imaginable. I released it. Then I saved and told myself I would never play it again. I'd just find a new copy. That's when weird things started happening in my real life. At first, I didn't notice anything. I started to have nightmares more often instead of not dreaming at all. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, sometimes in tears. I would never remember the nightmare. I always felt like I was being watched. I thought it was just a coincidence. Soon enough, though, I knew something was amiss. I started to see shadows. Not really at important times, just at times when I was alone. Walking to school, sitting at home before my roommates got home. The one place it kept occurring was in the middle of the night. See, I kept waking up at the same time every night. It was around 1 AM where I'd wake up and have to use the bathroom, which was at the end of the hall of the apartment building. It was a large bathroom and normally empty, but I always found it creepy at night, even before this happened. When I started to see things in the bedroom, I'd normally be sitting on the toilet, trying not to fall asleep. And then, I'd see out of the corner of my eye, a shadow outside the stall. It was always just walking past and only peripheral. I knew no one was in the bathroom because I wouldn't at least hear them walking. Therefore, I had always marked it off as my imagination. But I kept happening. I guess some people wouldn't be scared, but I honestly was. Maybe it was irrational. Maybe it was stupid, but I was still scared. I stopped sleeping at night because I was now seeing the shadow always moving, always out of the corner of my eye. I couldn't sleep, I barely ate. I was jumpy and afraid even of the smallest bumps during the day and night. Then, the hallucinations started. Scenes would play out in front of my eyes, normally just children getting hit by buses or people with knives behind trees watching me and waiting, things of that nature. I almost stopped going to school, but I knew I couldn't. This was my dream. How could I just abandon it because of some night terrors? There was a day, while watching a video in my animal tech class, when one of the hallucinations started. Instead of watching other people being hurt, it was me. A four-legged shadow jumped at me, and I felt a bite on my arm. I started to scream as I watched blood drip down my arm. Leon used bite. The words repeated themselves over and over in my head, as more bites appeared on my skin and more blood poured from my wounds. I felt myself growing dizzy, and I was suddenly on the floor. The people around me started crying out and screaming. Faintly I heard someone say, "Call 911," before I blacked out. I woke up in the hospital, bandaged and unsure what happened. I asked over and over what happened, but no one answered me. For now, the hallucinations had stopped. My friend Christina came to visit one day when my family wasn't there. She looked a little uncomfortable at first, but once we started talking, she relaxed until I brought up that day. "What happened?" I asked her. She hesitated for a minute before replying. "We don't really know. Everyone else says they saw you clawing your own skin off, but..." She trailed off before continuing. "I thought I saw something else taking bites out of your skin, but no one believes me." I looked at her for a minute as I started to piece things together. Could it be possible that I was being haunted by a spirit in the form of a Growlithe? I waited till she left and thought things through. The only thing I couldn't figure out was, why me? A couple days later, I was sent back to my apartment and a warning to take my medication, but I wasn't thinking about that really. I was thinking about the Pokémon game and what I should do. I decided not to tell anyone what happened, because they probably already thought I was a nutcase anyway. Surprisingly, I was allowed to continue on with school like everyone else, though I was a little behind on classwork. As soon as I got home, I started to see the shadows again, but I knew what had to be done. I dug through my games till I found the blue cartridge, and I put it in my coat pocket along with a lighter and incense. I walked away from my apartment and down underneath a bridge that was close by and placed the cartridge on the ground. I knelt down beside it and lit the incense. I knew the shadow was there. I could feel it. I said a small apology to the spirit before releasing it from its bounds, and with that, I smashed the cartridge with my shoe. I heard a small scream that was almost inaudible, but I stomped on the game until there was nothing more than broken bits on the concrete. I gathered up the smashed pieces and walked over to a small area with dirt by the creek that the bridge ran over. I buried the pieces and placed another incense there and let it burn. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I don't know if the spirit is at peace now, or if it was just trying to get a point across. I wouldn't know that point even if I tried to figure it out. Although, after I smashed the game, the shadows stopped haunting me. I stopped having nightmares and hallucinations. I go to where I buried the game at least once a month to apologize to the spirit. Everything mostly went back to normal. The only thing I have left to remember my ordeal is the scars of bite marks on my arm, and everyone in a while I'll have a dream of a Growlithe, with a purple aura that follows me everywhere I go until I wake up. That was the purple aura. Final thoughts? Cliched garbage. I need to say what I've said 1,000 times, and I will continue to say this every single time I see it, because it is by far one of the worst things you can do in your creepypasta. Do not acknowledge your cliché with shit lines like, I know, this is sounding a lot like a typical creepypasta. You're not just using a cliché, you're using it and then announcing to every reader that you're using it just in case they missed it. Not only was this done, but it was done in the third sentence of the story. I can all but promise that more than half of the people who clicked on that page stopped reading after that line. The worst part is that the story keeps fucking doing this. It even says later, quote, "I know you guys are expecting me to say there was a creepy picture on the cartridge," end quote. Just stop bringing it up! At this point, it's like you're trying to make fun of other cliched creepypasta and your own creepypasta that's also using cliches. The line, quote, "You feel like someone is watching you," end quote. I've read that same fucking line in a dozen creepypasta. That is a cliche. Don't make fun of cliches when you use cliches. It makes you look like an idiot. They even say, quote, "Cliche, I know," end quote, flat out saying that their story is cliched. You never see a werewolf novel have a line like, "No, it wasn't a vampire that it was out at night. That would be stupid." It's generally good sense to not take cheap, stupid pot shots at other stories in your own story. Having lines like this add nothing of value to your story and only serves to backfire on you if you have any mistakes. Just don't do it. Overall, I don't really have much else to say. The story was cliched through and through, between being haunted, the game affecting real life, things being shaken off when they shouldn't. The story was just unoriginal, completely. That's it for this creepypasta. Tune in again next time when we tackle yet another video game creepypasta. If you want to write your own story, help peer edit a story, or even just read the stories early, check out the description where you'll find a link to the creepypasta section of my forum. You'll also find a link to the playlist of every creepypasta reading I've done. If you're interested in keeping up with me on my blog posts, join the Facebook fan page linked below. And if you want to support me and what I do, check out my Patreon page in the description. Remember that if you want to have your story read on the show, you must stay active on your post on the forum, as well as read the forum rules. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, sweet dreams.